Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and in this video I'm going to recount some of my favorite experiences of 2022. This is going to range from movies, games, and some TV shows. So this is more so about what I experienced in 2022 rather than what came out in 2022. But there are some moments, especially in the games I played, where they overlap. That being said, let's get started with some of my favorite movies I watched this year. I started the year off watching a lot of Shinya Tsukamoto films, most of which I watched on this pretty cool collection by Arrow Video. One of my favorites from the collection is Haze. It's not a full film, but a short film. Essentially, it's about this guy in an unknown claustrophobic location. As he's crawling throughout the tight corners and corridors, he's trying to figure out why he's there. And I really love entrapment stories like this, and I think it does a lot with very little. But another of my favorites that's not on the collection is Gemini. One of my favorite things about it is how it takes familiar tropes from classic stories, plays, and such, but reworks it in a new way. It's not as in-your-face as some of the other Tsukamoto films, but it's very stylish in color palette, cinematography, and production design. But another director I ended up exploring this year was Takashi Miike. If you've seen some Japanese live-action movies, you've probably seen something he's worked on. He's done a lot. But because he's done a lot, not every work he's done is great, but I think a lot of his works are really good. Which is probably not that good of a lead-in into the Dead or Alive trilogy, which I found okay. Dead or Alive 1 is renowned for its shocking moments. In fact, Miike loves to shock his audience. But outside of those shocking moments, I didn't find the first Dead or Alive too noteworthy. The opening was great though. Honestly, if you can pull it up on some streaming service, watch the first 5 minutes. And to give another compliment, I did enjoy the theme. But although its idea is interesting, most of the movie is just okay. Unlike Dead or Alive 2, which I really love. Tsukamoto cameos in it, and I think he might have had a bit of influence over Miike. It has some unique abstract presentations that aren't necessarily found in some of Miike's other works. And it also kinda continues on the theme of the relation between money and crime. But I won't get too much into that because it's kind of spoilers territory, and I only say that because the movie is a really slow movie, but I really love the characters, so I enjoy seeing them build up to that big point. It has many shocking instances like Miike's other works, but also substance. I really love Dead or Alive 2 Birds. And Dead or Alive 3 kinda just sucks, so I won't talk about that. And another movie of Miike's that I watched this year that I really enjoyed was Zebra Man. It features the actor Sho Aikawa from the Dead or Alive series, and this time he plays a nerdy teacher who ends up dressing up as his favorite tokusatsu superhero. And it's this really quirky movie about accepting who one is and, accepting yourself and accepting others. And I think Aikawa was a really great actor to choose for this because he's known for playing Yakuza, but here he plays a nerd. So when the teacher is unexpected to be this big superhero otaku, the actor is unexpected to play this geeky role. It's a really fun, silly, sometimes actiony movie with a good message. I really enjoyed it. But what may be my favorite Miike work is Happiness of the Katakuris. It's a movie about this family who invested into an inn. But one day in the inn, someone dies. The father doesn't want the inn's name tarnished as being the place where someone died. In fact, several people who go there end up dying. So it's about this family who ends up kind of bonding and growing closer together from hiding these bodies. And I didn't mention it was a musical. And sometimes claymation? It's a very weird movie that has a field day with tones. But I love this twisted view on this family trying to find happiness and what that happiness is and if that happiness is even achievable. It's funny, sad, and honestly the song selection is pretty good. Now also this year I ended up exploring a lot of Wes Craven's work. As for Nightmare on Elm Street, the films he worked on are obviously the best. The movies are kind of like a psychological horror because it delves into one's mind, but it's also kind of like a slasher because Freddy Krueger deals out real consequences. So I found the horror to be a really unique mix, and I loved the special effects in the dream world. And even if my favorites are the ones Wes Craven worked on, I still get a joy out of some of the later goofy ones. Then I went on to Scream, which I really loved. I just love that era of movies it came out in, and its postmodernist approach creates clever plays on the horror genre. These are very suspenseful movies, but I also like that they are mystery movies. They kept me on the edge for who the killer was. I think the first one has really great writing and great suspense. Though I think 2 isn't as well written, I think its suspense might be better. And Scream 3? We don't talk about that one. But I really loved Scream 4. I think Scream 4 might be my favorite. Continuing its postmodern writing, it's a movie about remakes. It's kind of like a movie that's continuous, but about a killer remaking the events of the first movie. And it has something that I love in writing, this kind of deja vu sense. If I were to describe Scream 4, I would say eerily familiar, but frighteningly distinguished. I talked a little bit about Perfect Blue in my Q&A, but this is still a really great movie. Really love the thrill of it, and especially in the unique medium of animation. And one movie that I watched this year that I really loved was Del Toro's Pinocchio. It surprised me, it's definitely one of the most emotional movies I watched this year, and it cleverly uses several characters to craft this theme of fathership. Now on to the games. One game that came out this year that I loved was Sonic Frontiers. Now, I was very worried about an open world Sonic game. I'm not that much into open world, so I was hesitant to accept the series to turn to that route. But it was so fun running around that open zone world, and I kinda understand what they mean when they said open zone. You go throughout the world collecting these memory tokens, and you'll usually see one off in the distance somewhere else. So you'll try to maneuver yourself to get that the fastest. And it's almost like the way you maneuver through it makes its own level, and it carries the spirit of what made the classic game so fun, keeping up the momentum. I was also worried about the combat in the game because I was like, okay, Sonic Unleashed combat wasn't fun. I don't really like when you put combat in platformers, so I was really hesitant to accept it. But the combat was simple, but also had a little bit of depth in combos, and it was fun to streak things together. As for the cyberspace zones, yeah, I think they should have been better. I think they should have had more than 4 themes. I don't think they should have lifted from other stage designs from past games. Although the Sonic Adventure 2 levels are really great, they're really fun to play in this new engine. But for the most part, the cyberspace levels are just okay. Oh, and I didn't even cover Frontiers' story, which is a return to form in that the characters have this continuity from previous games, and they act like the characters. I hope they keep this up in the next Sonic game and improve upon the little flaws that I have with the cyberspace levels. And another game I played this year was Root Film, a visual novel. I love visual novels. It's about this director who's joining this anthology project. This production is revitalizing a project from years past that was cancelled. The director and protagonist, Yagumo, also known as Max, ends up finding footage that seems to display a real murder. And while scouting out locations to direct his film, other murders occur. And it builds up this really interesting mystery that calls to mind some of the later Ace Attorney games where all these cases are connected. Speaking of Ace Attorney, it features a similar gameplay where you point out contradictions and discrepancies into other people's testimony. But it's really simple, even more simple than the prior game, Root Letter. It's really simple, but it's still fun and it can be a beginner's introduction to the genre. I just mentioned its predecessor, Root Letter, which I had also enjoyed, although I played it, I think, 2 years back. Root Film takes place in the same city, Shimane. And one thing about these games that I enjoyed is they really go into Shimane culture. The characters visit some notable sites and go over history and myth of certain locations. So it's kind of like this detective mystery / tourist game. It's really interesting. But I played another detective mystery visual novel game this year that was The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative. The scenario is by Kotaro Uchikoshi from the Zero Escape series, and I just love his work. His games are known for these timeline-crossing, head-spinning, mind-blowing mysteries, and Nirvana Initiative is no exception. It's the sequel to the game The Somnium Files, which I also loved. But you can play the Nirvana Initiative first. It's interesting because the game opens up with a game show where you can answer questions pertaining to the first game. If you get those answers right, the game allows you some dialogue in certain scenes that smooth over the events between the first game and the second game. So it somehow manages to be this standalone story while also building off of its predecessor in a way that fans like me, I just loved. One of the things I praised the first game for was how cinematic it was. I think it's really great for beginners, but also it's very interactive, which I think many people who aren't usually into visual novels will love. These detectives can go into people's dreams and there they end up investigating to get an answer. But you also have moments in virtual reality where you try to replay and rework the crime scene and how it happened. And it's just so cool to walk around the crime scene and examine it. The gameplay is better and more interactive than the first, and the story blew my mind. I've played a lot of Uchikoshi games, and he's still catching me off guard. This is one of the best twists in an Uchikoshi game, let alone any game I've played. Game of the year 2022, and probably gonna be one of my top games of the decade. Now we're getting into the TV shows, which I don't have that long of a list. I started the year off with Godzilla SP. I love the Godzilla movies, I own every one, and I love monster movies. And this one was very unique, and the story was superb. Not to mention the art style, I love the saturated palette. And if you're a fan of Godzilla like me, you'll find a couple of references to other monsters that caught me by surprise that were in this movie. As for the story, it's kind of fitting I just talked about an Uchikoshi work because that's a bit what it reminds me of. Godzilla SP really dives into its quantum physics. It's not like some of the Godzilla movies where you can just sit back and enjoy the monsters. Though they are enjoyable, you really have to pay attention to the science of it to understand what's going on. If I were to describe it, I'd say it's kinda like Steins Gate meets Godzilla, a killer combination for me. And as for my last favorite, it's something I watched quite recently, Go Dog Go. I watched this with my girlfriend and we got hooked. It's a young children's show, but it's still entertaining. And we loved all the cute characters exploring this fun dog world. My favorite characters were Frank and Beans, who are just unapologetic troublemakers of the town. It's a simple show, but I really like it and it's become a comfort cartoon for me. So those were my favorite moments, stuff I experienced, favorite whatever I'll call this video, of 2022. As for a slight footnote, 2022 was a great year for my channel where I got a lot of subscribers, so I hope to grow it out even more and make even more content, which you should be seeing soon. So I will see you later. I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and thank you for watching. Zibbo, bye bye!